Africa Film for Impact Festival.
Okay, good morning and welcome to the second of the UCT Impact Series sessions at the Africa Film for Impact Festival 2020. We are very excited as the team from the University of Cape Town Centre for Film and Media Studies to be partnering with AFFIF this year. And this is a fantastic space for us to share knowledge between participants and panel members about how to design impact strategies. And this session, Impact Design 1, features 3 spectacular case studies from the African continent. We have Wanja Emily, who's the impact campaign producer of the film Thank You for the Rain, joining us from Nairobi, Kenya. We have Nikki Riedlinghuis from South Africa, who is the director, producer, and impact producer of the film This Land. And Pastor Arthur Pratt, who's joining us from Sierra Leone to talk about his wonderful film Survivors, which is about the Ebola outbreak a few years ago. So it seems incredibly topical right now. Welcome, panelists. I'm so happy to have you here. Guests, just a little bit of housekeeping. If you want to follow the festival on social media, the handle is at AFFIF, that's AFFIF.ng on Instagram, and our handle is at UCT_TV. And please use the chat to introduce yourselves to us and to each other. It would be lovely to see who's in the room. So tell us your name, what you do, whether you're a filmmaker or an activist. And then you'll see that we're going to be putting links into the chat as we go along. So please keep an eye on the chat to see all of the resources related to the things, the films and the organizations and the things that our filmmakers speak about in their presentations. And then we will break for Q&A. So please do post your questions in the chat. Sorry, not the Q&A. We don't have a Q&A in this Zoom room, but please post your questions in the chat. And then I will pose them to the filmmakers as we go along. I also want to just invite you to our sessions tomorrow. We have 2 sessions tomorrow. The first one starts a little bit early. It's 8:30 Western African time, but it's going to be amazing. We're bringing impact campaigns from 3 other continents into the discussion. And then straight after that, at 10 Western African time, we're going to be talking to representatives from Doc Society, Good Pitch, people who've run Good Pitch locals in their countries. There will be people from the UK, from India, from Africa, and it's going to be very exciting. So please join us for all of those sessions. Right. I'd like to ask the panelists to start by each introducing themselves and the project very briefly, and then we're going to screen your trailer. So we'll do a quick round robin between the 3 of you, and then we'll get into the meat of the talk. So this first one is just going to be who you are and what your project is. We'll watch the trailer and then you can go into detail. I would like to invite Wanja to tell us a little bit about her project first.
Thank you, Liani, and thank you, the whole team. I'm so excited to be here and to connect with my African peeps from the West in Nigeria and everybody else watching from all over the globe. So my name is Wanja Emily. I am based in Nairobi, Kenya, and I am the East African impact producer of the film Thank You for the Rain. And this is a story of a small-scale farmer called Kisilu Musia. And in the course of 5 years, the director of this film follows him. And you see him transform from a farmer who is struggling with the effects of climate change to a community leader, to a climate change activist who takes this message of hope and conviction and belief all the way to COP21 in Paris at the Conference of Parties to represent grassroots communities, to represent small-scale farmers such as himself at this level of climate change talks. So the film is a co-production, I would say, between Kenya, because it's the story of the incredible Kisilu Musia, and UK, the producer is from there. He's called Hugh Hartford. And Norway, because Julia, the director who ended up co-authoring the film with Kisilu, is from there. So if we can, I would love to share with you the trailer, and then we'll get into the campaign later.
Great. Michael, would you mind playing Thank You for the Rain trailer for us?
When the rains fails, every farmer feels like running away.
Christine, what can you say about rain today?
No, I think when we look on the sky, it seems as if it will rain soon.
Are you happy with it?
I'm very happy with it because it's the mother of all living things.
You can be in bad terms with your family members, hearing that you have nothing for their bellies. Unfortunately, that is a very big problem to some people and to me.
We speak people, amen. Kuni ati asumbe. Lakini nina mwetu teta mizi ta memana suira wa climate change. We kwa yola wa gwatiala nongi na withie wikite sai bandu wazi ngisa kugwa kuna ati alela nengutia miti ya nondo mana. No mujirane be bangona umwe balo.
Has this ever happened before?
The other season we were crying no rain. Now we are talking of flood. Everything is being contradicting.
It's crunch time at the COP21 in Paris. The objective and requirements are clear. We need a universal agreement on climate.
I'm going for my family's future. This is my chance to share my story. The story that I have is an alarm to everyone.
They have polluted our atmosphere for 200 years, and their wealth is based upon our poverty.
What are the qualities of a good father? Who is a good leader?
Are you nervous?
No. Yeah, I'm not scared in any way. I'm ready.
Great, thank you for that one, Ja. Next, I'd like to shift to Mickey Riedlinghuis, who is going to introduce us to her project, This Land.
Sorry, I didn't realize my video was off. Thanks, Wanja. Thanks, Liani. So I'm the director and also the impact producer for a documentary called This Land. The film follows the story of a small village in rural KwaZulu-Natal, a province in South Africa, where a small community fights a giant mining company who wants to come and forcibly remove them from their land, to develop a mine, and doing so without any consultation or any benefits to the community. And like Thank You for the Rain, there's a central activist main character in the form of Reverend Mavuso, Bekiseni Mavuso, who's a truly remarkable leader and real inspiration to have worked with on the film. So the IMPAC campaign was very strongly aligned to what is the vision of the community, what they wanted to achieve. And so the film was very much aligned to showing their struggle and bringing that into the IMPAC campaign, so that we're answering to the needs of the community, and which is pertaining to the recognition of their land rights, and to, you know, a lot of these things happen in rural communities because it's not spotlighted. Nobody sees it. It happens silently. Big swaths of land disappear and become commercialized. And so by telling their story and putting it out there, it couldn't happen silently. And then we had to invigorate it with a campaign in order to ensure that it stays that way. So I think you'll get a much better idea of the story if you look at Mavuso rather than me. So I'm going to ask Michael to play the trailer for this land.
We have seen that Amakosi are selling land to business people, mining companies, giving land to foreigners to build malls. We are trying to show not only the chief, even the king, that we are the landowners here.
Sasesizala ngokuxoshwa ababelima amahlathi.
Indaba ukuthi bayahamba la, ngabona nje imoto ifika zayingena zimba, kwathiwa imayini la ihamba manje.
Ukuthi batholani kasazi, babizwa kanjalo, wathi hayi kunomcebo lapha phansi, nina nonke nizosuswa.
Iphakethe lodwa likaZipho akhiphe imvilophi, akhiphe imali ayifake emvilophini, ayinikeze inkosi.
Khona lento umthetho yezuvele loqhamuza uzoshintsha imncele.
Yabo nje babe mingale manje bafuna nale misi ngoba ungekho nje. Indlela ukuthi sidayiseke.
Sathola umbiko la ngomunye owasebela kushuthi umuntu owayethengiwe wayeyinkabi kuthiwa akazobulala la.
Nami sengibuye ngiphile ngokucala. Kube ngathi yimi ngilale njengonogwayi. Imayini niyibiza ngentuthuko. Imayini is a mass eviction project.
Ngoba kuyokwazeka ukuthi safela ukuthi imayini asiyifune endaweni esakhiwe.
Phansi ngovalo phansi.
Uzohlakazeka. Ngezwakala ngithi balo.
Hey, wozani lapha man.
Nobody can fight for us except us.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Mickey. And now I want to hand over to Arthur to tell us about Survivors.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Arthur Pratt. I'm a pastor and a filmmaker here in Sierra Leone. So Survivors is about the Ebola outbreak we had here in West Africa some time ago. And we know that this outbreak was heavy on countries like Sierra Leone, Guinea, and Liberia. So it's an attempt for us to tell our story for ourselves and to ensure that our own perspective of what actually happens goes out. That's what Survivors looks at. So the film, in a way, is a co-production by the Freetown Media Center, which is in itself a project, an impact project. It's from a film done on our civil war. We had a 12 years civil war, and Banker White, who happens to be our co-producer of Survivors, also did a film on that civil war, and then he came to Sierra Leone to see what he could do to help the creative industry. That's how we met, and that's how we started UNTV in itself. And We Own TV is a platform that helps build the creative industry in Sierra Leone, especially the cinematic industry in Sierra Leone, by offering tutelage. We offer teachings and guides to filmmakers in Sierra Leone. And so when we had the outbreak, we decided to do this film so that we're able to tell the stories, because it's like a counter to what was happening in the media. You know, the kind of stories that were going out by then was not what we saw. So we decided to tell them the story. So you'll find out that it's a co-production between us in Sierra Leone and our guys in the United States. But it was purely shot by Sierra Leoneans, you know, from the media center. These are filmmakers who collaborated within the media center to do the shooting of the film itself. That's good for now. You can play the trailer.
The advent of Ebola in Sierra Leone is something that I take very, very serious, because it touches my life, it touches my faith, it touches the very foundation of my being.
If they tell you how many drivers they don't die. What is thing start now this street on now 5. Now 2 left. Near one part, the name Sogo. They can't just know. You understand?
I don't reach there, but the person are uphill. You know it before I can. One try for see what we would do.
This is what I tell you. You say you said the army just come into the number this morning and our area. That's make it to them. If you see make blunder, they take out and me they just make number for later.
I believe say God na the impossibility specialist. Usai doctor the tire away say ya open all the God can change situation. So I believe for pray for me patients them. I so believe for pray for me patient the way I go inside. Because of Africa setting, the money that they give we, people that they go and talk, say that they pay we beaucoup money for the work because of the kind of country where we dey. It's about $100 per week. That money need able to replace your life. So now God no more go able for bless we.
Sierra Leone is a strong country. This is what makes us unique. We survived 10 to 12 years of brutal, one of the most brutal war in Africa. We survived it, and we survived Ebola.
Thanks so much. So folks, as you can see, these are 3 incredible films, really, really powerful films, but wait till you hear about the impact campaigns. Then you're going to see how a powerful film with the support of a really strategic campaign can effect real change in the world. Wanja, I'd like to throw the ball back to you. Can you please tell us more about your impact design? Who was your target market? What were your goals? And how did you go about reaching your audiences?
Yes, sure. Thank you. So I'll take the next couple of minutes just sharing with you a broad overview of our impact campaign. And the first thing that I'm going to start with is, Liani, if you can help me, you can just go to slide 4. So the thing that I'm gonna start with is by saying, like, why this film? And we believe, as a film team, basically, we believe that climate change is one of the biggest injustices of our time, and it is a threat to human rights. So on a macro level, this film is about climate change, but at the core of it, it's a personal story of hope that addresses one of the most urgent issues of our time. And so the film had a world premiere at CPH Docs in 2017 in Copenhagen. It was acquired by a distributor, Outlook Films, and that meant that it managed to screen globally. Like, it's had over 230 screenings worldwide, has been sold to broadcasters, and won over 10 international awards. So it did have that traditional festival distribution and ran the circuit. But more than that, and while all this was important, it gave the film the global resonance among peers and among the international community. But then, in addition to that, it was important for the film to have an impact beyond all of this. So our impact work, if we can go to the next slide, kicked off when we participated at the 2016 Good Pitch event in Kenya. I think Liani had mentioned the Good Pitch event earlier. So we participated at the event that happened in Kenya. It was hosted by DocuBox. And later we also participated at the Good Pitch event in Europe by Doc Society. I should add that during the event in Kenya, this is when I met the film team. And this is also when I came on board the film as an impact producer. So these 2 programs were really important because they helped us to bridge the target audiences between the global North and the global South under the universal issue of climate change. The events connected us to stakeholders across the board. We're talking about grassroots stakeholders, regional, national, and international, and they included NGOs, civil society, and private companies. So the process of finding impact partners, the right ones at this very early stage in the campaign, was very, very important, and it gave us a very strong start to the impact campaign. Also, it's worth mentioning that at this point, the film was in the very last stages of post-production. So we divided our strategy into 4 impact dynamics. And these dynamics, you can easily find them in the Impact Field Guide, which is online for free. And they are changing hearts and minds. They are changing behavior, changing structure, and building communities. And so to do this, we broadly divided our campaign into 4 key steps, which I'm going to share with you. The first one was a pilot stage. What it simply means to have a pilot stage is that we sought to find out in Kenya, because we were running the campaign in 2 regions, in East Africa, starting with Kenya, and in Norway. So in these 2 places, next slide, we sought to find out what was the story environment, what existed. So in Kenya, we found out that as far as the issue of climate change is concerned, our people know about climate change through experience. They can see the weather is changing. They know that they can no longer rely on the traditional knowledge, but they do not necessarily understand its magnitude as a global threat, and maybe some of the deliberate actions they need to take to be resilient and to adapt. So we felt in this case that the film and the story was coming into a fresh story environment. So we sought to find out from our communities, does this film and this story resonate with them? Does it speak their truth? And from the organizations, we sought to find out if they felt they could use this film as a tool in their work to drive advocacy and awareness. So we also dubbed the film into 2 local languages. Then in Norway, we found that the people know about climate change. They know it's happening, but many are not convinced by the solutions that were being proposed and are being proposed. They, for instance, couldn't see how they would stop things like oil production or cut plane travels. So this seemed very just hard to do, and they didn't see the connection of that in their day-to-day lives. So here we felt the film was coming into an entrenched story environment with possible issue fatigue. So we sought to find out from the organizations there if maybe they could use this film as an important tool to help in better communication and maybe drive a better or more effective call to action. So this information that we gathered in our pilot stage, we then narrowed down to 3 main components that would help us cut across all the regions and hopefully globally as well. The first component, this is where, next slide, this is where we used the film to speak to international advocacy and engagement. We used this film to give Kisilu a platform to speak at key international events, both locally and internationally. For instance, he spoke at the TED Global in Arusha, at the UNEP Ecosystem Division in Nairobi. He addressed members of the Norwegian Parliament at the Talanoa Dialogues in 2018, among many other speaking engagements. Us doing this was so important. And Kisilu speaking at these platforms and these events was very important because by doing this, he was representing voices and perspectives of frontline communities and indigenous communities who most of the time, they are excluded from this level of climate discussions. And we knew, for instance, in sub-Saharan Africa, he was representing, say what, over 30 million small-scale farmers. So we also use these platforms as well to share the vision of our impact campaign and to forge partnership opportunities. Then the second component, this is where the previous slide was good. Yeah, that one is good. The second component is where we were now speaking to the national and regional impact advocacy. So in both regions, we would use the film screenings to forge partnerships and to just see who was out there in the climate change sector and in the environment sector with whom we could speak with and share our vision. So in Kenya, we started by holding a premiere of the film in the capital city, Nairobi. We invited potential partners and NGOs and people from the private sectors and peers and even journalists. In Norway, we reached out to potential partners directly, most of whom had heard actually about the film from international forums and festivals. So doing the screenings this way helped us to meet partners, some of whom we are working with till today. Then we also did screenings at the community level. Next slide. And yeah, and the next one. Sorry, I forgot to tell you to go to the previous. So we screened the film where Kisilu comes from, but then we also needed to screen the film to other counties in Kenya and in East Africa that have the same climatic conditions, such as where Kisilu comes from. So every time we got this opportunity to screen to communities, we use this as an arena for dialogue. And we are bringing together community members and their leadership to discuss the most urgent climate challenges in their area that need immediate intervention. And through this process, as you know, like Africa, we as a region, access is a big problem to us. We're talking about access. In our case, it was access to water, access to seeds that are drought resistant, access to markets, access to information, and even access to our leadership. And so using the film this way helped us to converge the different stakeholders in one place where they could have this kind of conversations, or at least start. Then in Norway, where Julia comes from, we use the film to enhance the debates and conversations. Previous is fine, Liani. We use the film to enhance the debates and conversations in the run-up to the 2017 elections at the time. And voters were encouraged to consider the issue of climate change when making their ballot decisions. As far as screening is concerned as well, we target the youth, both in Kenya and in Norway, because we believe that it's important to involve the youth in climate work early. So in Kenya, for instance, you could see the students really connected with the story. They saw their parents in Kisilu and they wanted to know what they should do when they go back home. We've had over 20 screenings in Kenya so far. In Norway, the next slide, the students appreciated to see climate issues depicted through the human experience. And we were able to talk about climate justice and how it's interconnected, in that what happens in the global south and vice versa ends up affecting the whole world. Then the last component, which is component 3, this is where, led by Kisilu, we partnered with the Chavonda. It's a community-based organization. And we have constructed a 30,543 cubic meter earth dam in Mutomo. And this speaks to the problem, the issue of access to water. The next slide. So this serves over 300 households, each say with an average of 5 family members. Around it, we have, irrigation model farms, and we are in the process of putting up a resource center. We can check out the next slide. And the rationale behind this kind of a structure is that it forms an economic ecosystem. It means that when we have prolonged drought seasons, they have an alternative means of generating income, because there's a place where the livestock, for instance, can go and get water, or they can just get like daily or home use water. Also, having a resource center or having this kind of a setup, it means that there's easier access to markets, information, resource allocation by government and other partners working in the area, because now they're able to organize better and they can be found easily. So in general, this work has led to different kinds of growth, like table banking formation, tree planting groups. But some of the things that we have come to see in our journey that I'm going to share with you now in running such an impact campaign using storytelling is that we have seen the power of the film to organize and strengthen not just the community work, but partnerships. Over 10 organizations in Kenya have used the film so far in their work to drive awareness and engagement. We have built partnerships. We have partners that have come on board to offer both field expertise, both hardware, funding. This includes the dam, where you saw that land was donated by a community elder. And really noteworthy is the collaboration between Kisilu and Julia, where, while it started with Julia filming his life and the issues that he's going through as far as climate change is concerned, they ended up collaborating, and Kisilu became a co-author. So we have seen increased collaboration between organizations such as ourselves, filmmakers, DocuBox, for instance, Christian Aid, Enrich Ball Foundation. And this is very important, especially when we think about our community and the kind of insight and the direction they continue to offer the rest of us as a team. So I would say that as we have seen that storytelling is a bridge. It's a bridge between diverse stakeholders along the value chain, and storytelling cuts across even geographical boundaries. So film demonstrates the power of unlikely alliances to drive real change. And all of this would not have been possible without a film and without this kind of radical collaborations. So I would say we are now in the 2nd year of our campaign. Obviously, we had to slow down because of the pandemic, but yeah, we keep going, right? We keep going as best as we can. So I'm gonna share that for now, and then later I'm probably gonna get into some of the points, or if you have questions, you can just pop them in.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Wanja. This is so inspiring. And it really is amazing to see how you can run an impact campaign at a high level international, on a high level international stage, but then also to do tangible things for small communities, like physically construct dams. And it just shows you that you can be really creative around the impact goals that you set, but always to keep them specific, right? So far, we don't have any questions specific to your presentation, Wanja. I'm sure that they will come later, and then we can pose the questions to the whole panel. But there have been quite a few expressions of appreciation and respect and awe for you in the chat. I'd like to go to Mickey Redlinghuis next to tell us more about this land, and then we'll shift to Arthur after that.
Sorry, I was trying to get the host's attention to unmute me. I couldn't control my own mute button. So I had, hopefully I've got Michael's attention. I'm sitting here waving, hello, talk to me, someone.
Welcome back.
Thank you, Emily. Maybe I should just have stayed muted and listened to you some more, because I think your campaign is such an inspiration. And I feel slightly intimidated to jump in after that. I mean, really big shout out. Beautiful work, but I've said that to you before. So I'm not going to gush now. I'm just going to share my screen and chat to you about this land. So this discussion I've titled From Cinema to Community Centers, and I'm going to talk to you about developing a grassroots impact strategy. The campaign for this land, which was really very strongly focused on how to get the film to communities who are most affected by the similar story as depicted in the film. And these are rural communities who often don't have access to mainstream media outlets, who sometimes are hard to reach. So it's looking at how do we reach those audiences that are often marginalized by access to theaters and broadcast and online distribution. So Lo Mhlaba, that's the isiZulu version of the film. So I guess the first thing just to say is that obviously we had to create language versions of the film. So the film was made in isiZulu English initially, and then later also translated into Setswana. I think I'm just going to stop my screen and just say, I think something I need to say up front is that I really came into this process without any knowledge of how to be an impact producer. It's not like I went somewhere and gathered a wealth of information and suddenly could do it. This is very much a learning curve process for me. I was the filmmaker, and you know, as you make a film, and a filmmaker, you're making a social justice film because you want to bring about change. And once the film is completed, I realized that it's going to need a strategy if we were going to see that change happen. So by default, I took the job on, and I did my own research. I read a lot. I spoke to a lot of people, amongst others, Leonie. I looked at other impact campaigns and took inspiration. So I would really encourage you to look at what other people are doing when you're thinking of your own impact campaign. How do I move forward? Oh, there we go. So first up, I want to say a little bit of context about the film. The film was commissioned by an NGO called the Land and Accountability Research Centre, which is also based in the Law Centre of the University of Cape Town. And they commissioned the film because they're working in the field around which the film wanted to create awareness, which is the recognition of informal land rights. And I'm sure this is a situation that's experienced in a lot of other countries on the continent, where there is communal land owned traditionally, possibly under the custodianship of customary law, customary leaders, or tribal leaders, however they are called in those countries, which is recognized, but often it disempowers the individuals living on the land. So when that power is misappropriated and not when those leaders act not as custodians but as owners of the land, it's a problem. And often, you know, finding valuable resources under the ground like mining minerals creates a financial gain from exploiting the land, and often communities are excluded. So this is the situation, this is the story we had to tell, and this is what was happening in Makasaneni. So up front, we identified the impact goals, and actually needed to find a story that was going to link to those impact goals. So this is a little bit of a roundabout way, and in fact, one could say this was going to be an NGO film, but as filmmaker, the organization brought me on board as filmmaker because they wanted a narrative film. They didn't want a traditional sort of lecture NGO film. They wanted a film that was going to engage people with story as well. So to reiterate what Wanja ended on, is the power and the importance of story. And luckily, I was commissioned by an organization that recognized that, and they gave the creative team the creative freedom to be able to decide or choose a good story to tell. The guideline goals was to raise awareness, which, as Leonie pointed out in the earlier session, is kind of your first base when it comes to impact, to influence legislation, and to create a tool for activism. So the legislation, influencing the legislation is, as we know, extremely difficult. And often that's like the first thing that you want to do, but it's the hardest thing to do. So we needed to find a way into influencing legislation so that legislation around customary law is not in conflict with our democratic constitution. I'm moving on. So connecting narrative to impact. Since we knew what the film needed to achieve, we needed to find a story and a strong character to drive that story. And so we researched a couple of similar situations around the country and chose the story of Mbekiseni Mavuso in Makasaneni because he was such a strong activist and so brave. And it was a really good story to tell that could engage audiences. And he was very committed to being a part of the film and using a film as a tool as activist. I think what's very important when you are making a film that has a strong mission, a strong social justice mission, is to stay true to the power of story. Nobody wants to come and see a film and be lectured at. So, you know, you need to, like Leonie mentioned earlier, use that spoonful of sugar to lure people in, to engage people, to make them not be able to leave their seats, to get to the end of the film. And at the end of it, feel so strongly that they want to support the impact campaign of the film. So the story we told, I'm just going to unshare. The story we told, focusing on Reverend Mavuso, is he led the charge in his village, but he had a very strong committee of leaders supporting him. And so we attended their meetings, we consulted with them, we spoke to them about what is the story that you want to tell, what do you want to get out there, and also assess the risks. Like, was the fact that we were going to be there filming going to bring more risk to them, or was it going to be the same amount of risk, or would it actually reduce the risk? Because that's a question that often comes up. You will see if you watch the film, which you can incidentally watch for free on AfriDocs, you will see that there has been an attempt on Mavuso's life and on other people in his committee. So this was a big thing for me, is you don't want to run in there blindly with your camera and actually draw attention to a situation and put people's lives at risk. But Mavuso felt very strongly that the film was in fact a tool that they could use to spotlight their situation so that they couldn't be disappeared quietly. Like, once people knew about them, there was a visibility which he felt offered a certain amount of protection. So the whole process was very consultative, and we documented their story over a period of a year until it reached a point where they had a very clear victory, which becomes a pinnacle in the film and a climax in the film, and could be used as an example for other communities on how to stay in the struggle and how to go for a win. So once we had the film and we'd aligned the story to the impact goals, identified the impact goals, it was important to, I don't know how to instantly go back to my screen share. identify the audience. So because we did want to influence legislation, we had to be sure to target political leaders, political decision makers, high profile media. So we launched at the Encounters Film Festival and also at the Durban Film Festival, and we invited panelists, very high profile panelists. This is Kgalema Motlanthe, who's our former president, and who's very respected as an upstanding example of leadership. And at the time, he was very instrumental in addressing policy in our legislation that was having an impact on people in rural areas. So we invited him, and the fact that he was in the audience targeting high profile people brings media attention. So as a result of having a series, he wasn't the only high profile. We had a couple of screenings with high profile panelists with very engaged discussions. And so as a result, we had a lot of other media spin-offs, radio interviews, TV interviews, print media articles, which spotlighted not only the film, but more importantly, the issue. And the person driving the issue in those discussions was always, you'll see next to the president there is the President Kgalema Motlanthe. Next to him is Mbekiseni Mavuso, who's the main character in the film. So his presence is really important in driving the conversations. So that is targeting the high profile audience, but then there's the audience who the story is about. That was really important. How are we going to reach rural audiences, people who can learn from the story and who can seek inspiration from the story? So I'm going to get into that detail in a moment. But just to sum up, the audience obviously is the decision makers, corporations with a stake in mining, rural communities, civil society leaders, students who will be future thought leaders in mining, engineering, geosciences, legal students, the broad South African public, of course, and the international audience. Then, as I said, I entered this process not with a huge amount of knowledge, but with a huge amount of passion and commitment. And so I did these gathering of information sessions with people from various communities featured in the film, and also who came to screenings because they were interested, and spoke to them about what is it that they wanted to achieve with the film. So this was after one of the festival screenings, speaking to community leaders, and together we devised a strategy. What was very clear from these discussions is they wanted the films in their communities, and we had to make a plan to get it there. So identifying the moment. In the President's State of the Nation speech, Cyril Ramaphosa, in the beginning of 2018, he proposed an amendment to the South African Constitution, which would allow for the expropriation of land without compensation. So this was a very big moment in South African politics and on the social landscape of the country. And as a result, it linked very strongly to the theme of the film. So because of this big moment, there was going to be public hearings around the country where people would discuss what that would mean. And so we linked up with the public hearings through organizations like the Land and Accountability Research Center, the Alliance for Rural Democracy, working in the field of land rights in rural areas. And we set up a series of workshops where we screened in conjunction with the public hearings. But so, of course, to make this happen, you needed partners. So first of all, implementation partners. We will hear tomorrow a little bit more about the Sunshine Cinema model, but they run mobile screening units around the country, and they offered us two mobile cinema screening units to use in our mobile cinema rollout, which was fantastic, and it just worked like a dream, because it meant that we could literally fit our whole screening into that little yellow suitcase, and we could screen anywhere, because a lot of the places we needed to go didn't have electricity, didn't have community halls. So we could literally set up here, we're setting up in a church. We could screen in churches, in people's lounge, in community halls. It gave us a lot of mobility. Obviously, one needs funding. So we partnered with the Nelson Mandela Foundation and the Bertha Foundation to support us financially. What's great about partnering with an organization like the Nelson Mandela Foundation is they made it very clear from the start that they're not just there to give money to the IMPAC campaign. They really supported the work that we were doing. And so what your funding partner does is not just give you money, but gets the word out, builds the conversation. And in fact, they, even to this day, are continuing with discussions around the issues raised in the film and working with rural networks built through the film. So finding and identifying the right partners is absolutely critical to an IMPAC campaign. And then, of course, your organizational partners. We were very lucky to have the Land and Accountability Research Center, who then linked us to the Alliance for Rural Democracy, who in turn linked us to many, many small leadership organizations and community leaders around the country who became our screening partners. So very important to have that. Should I go into practical implementation now, or should we cut and move on to another story?
Mickey, I think we need to cut and go to Arthur, and then we can always come back to you if you don't mind unsharing your screen.
Yep.
That would be great. Thank you. Arthur, over to you. Please tell us more about Survivors. It's been so interesting, listening and looking at these two projects in comparison to each other, because one of the other things that is so relevant to your design of your strategy is thinking about whether it's a bottom up or a top down campaign. And I think both of your campaigns so far show that you can influence the influencers by touching civil society, by touching the general public, and that the general public can then put pressure on decision makers. Arthur, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. So I'd like to start by giving people just a brief background with regards to filmmaking in Sierra Leone. So the Sierra Leonean filmmaking industry is one that we will call very, very young. It's in a very young stage. It's a filmmaking industry that was provoked by what's going on presently in Nigeria, the growth of Nollywood. And so you'll find out that most of the filmmakers in Sierra Leone are doing fiction films. So documentary filmmaking, I wouldn't say it's quite new in Sierra Leone, but it's not popular, it's just not known. Because we had some documentaries that came up like around 1990 to 1993, we had Sunrise in Paradise by Hilton File, who then was working with the BBC. We also had later, after the war, we had a documentary on our Civil War cry Freetown by Soyo Samura. So we used to see these stories. But one of the things that is important is we've not been able to use these stories to impact our lives. The issue of impact are not been up. So when we started with Survivors, like I said, we were like working for foreign companies, foreign news agencies, shooting for them because they were unable to come into the country. So we are like doing all the work for them. When I noticed that the media was not actually telling the right stories from my perspective, from my point of view. So I thought about it, and that this is a good chance for us to claim our identity, because for me, Survivors is first about identity. It's about me owning up to what I am and who I am and being able to tell my story from my perspective. That's very, very important for me, because the fact is that being a colonized country. We are used to other people telling our stories and believing others other than believing us. But what's important with survivors is that we chose not to tell this story from the perspective of professionals on the field. We chose to look at ordinary people who were giving themselves, making necessary and needed sacrifices to bring an end to the Ebola outbreak by then. So we had the ambulance driver, we had the nurse, we have this young guy living within the community. So all of that, for me, I think therefore sets the background for the impact of the story. By then, I was completely ignorant of what's of the impact side. I didn't know about it until I went to Kenya, Good Pitch, Kenya. That was when I first heard about impact in filmmaking. And so when I came back, I thought about it, and I was like, I need to take this side seriously. We need to do something about it. So just before the completion of the editing of the film, we decided that we want to, as part of our impact project, we want to promote storytelling. This is because people in Sierra Leone have been suffering from stoic silence for a very long time, being a very, our country is very polarized when it comes to politics and ethnicity, and people are not talking that much. But I do know that cinema has been a very powerful tool to get people talking. So the idea was to ensure that we train people the art of filmmaking and get them talking about get them talking about their situation. You get them to look at a film, they can talk about what's going on, talk about what's going on within their communities. So that's how we came to launch the We On TV Story Challenge. So the We On TV Story Challenge is I start as an open call, for people with either some amount of years in filmmaking or with absolutely no experience in filmmaking, but would love to go into documentary filmmaking. So it's like starting with short documentary filmmaking. And so we did our first call. We had like eight people on the first call. And then by the second call, we expanded to Liberia and Ghana. We had people from Liberia, we had people from Ghana. And we were able to take them through basic documentary filmmaking training and raise funds, empower them through funding, and get them to do their films. Some films are done, some films are still going on, but it shows that we're making impact, in the lives and getting people to own up to their stories. Because like I said, when you talk about stories, people talk fiction. So in order to tell your own story and to impact your community or to impact authorities, it's better you tell it from your perspective. When we finish the film with survivors, we were able to screen the film in multiple film festivals, starting from Encounters in South Africa. We went to China, we went to the United States, and we have PBS, screening the film. We also went to Europe, I think it was in 2018. I was in Northern Europe, went to Norway, Denmark, Sweden, and all of that. But within that particular period, I was able to talk to the head of Médecins Sans Frontières. Médecins Sans Frontières has been like an unofficial impact partner for our film. And that's what I'll say, because they've always been where the film is, and they've always been able to use the film to pass on their information, to talk about important topics around outbreak. So in Denmark, we screened with the Red Cross, and we were able to discuss, people were able to ask me, in Denmark and in Switzerland, people were able to discuss the issue of what do we think about how to deal with outbreaks? What does the film say about that? And we were able to share our ideas. By then, Ebola was in Congo, and we were just thinking as to how could the Sierra Leonean experience, be interpreted within the Congo context, you know. So the discussions were all positive. I give them my point of view, and we spoke lengthily around the issues of community participation, because that was like very strong in the theme, and in whatever I say, it's very strong. Community participation in dealing with outbreaks wherever you have them. And so after all these film festivals, when I get back home, one important thing was we are able to get Emory University in the United States to host our footages. You know, we shot a lot. We have this huge amount of data that's within the context of the film is unused. So we want to ensure that people use it because it's important. So we have something like 700 hours worth of footages, and we begin to subtitle those footages, and also continue filming with people infected and affected within their communities, you know, to ensure that all areas, you know, have a place to play. And so Emory University in the US have been, you know, they've agreed to host this data. Once it's not yet completed, once it's completely out for people to use for research. And that's another powerful thing that's, it's not like part of the impact that I was thinking, but it came along because of what we've been talking about and the importance of what we've been filming, you know. So all of that came along, and that's all made part of what our impact looks like. So when we get back home, one of the things I found out is that it's going to be very, very tough to get the political community to watch our film. The reason being that cinema has not been used as a tool in this part of the world. In Sierra Leone, it's very difficult. People don't use cinema as a tool. You know, it's very difficult. But I know that it's effective because I've used it about twice. For example, I remember by the end of the war, I did, together with an American producer, a short docudrama on border security with an organization called Conciliation Resource, a British organization. And it was my responsibility to take the film back to the border communities and discuss. And I saw the impact, I saw the effect of it. And so since then, I realized that cinema could be a very powerful tool for discussion. Because when that film was discussed, it started within the local level, and the discussion went on to national television and then to parliament. And then we begin to hear the discussion within the powers, the political corridors. So we attempted at taking the film to State House, but because of the level of bureaucracy, we've not been able. We tried to take the film to Parliament. It was very important for us. We've not also been able, because in Sierra Leone, the funny thing is you've got to belong to a political party for you to be able to have certain access. But one of the things I believe in community access. If you cannot affect the people from top down, you can affect them from down top. So we launched into the community and started doing community screenings. We did a lot of community screenings, and then we went to schools, we went to colleges. I could remember we went to many of the big colleges, and people, one of the discussions we had was with students offering social work, you know. They come up to me and they told me that they need that particular thing because it deals with aspect of social work. A lot of aspects, you know, things that have to do with social work is in the film, and it will help them in their course level. We try to screen the film at the School of Medicine and Allied Health Science. But basically, what we succeeded at, again, is to ensure that the discussion around outbreaks and how to deal with outbreaks continue. Because by the time we did our last, I remember we did our last screen at a point in time when the corona issue had just came up in Sierra Leone. People were talking about it. And so we thought about it and decided to give the film out to 3 of the top television stations in the country to hear out. And then we added this lockdown, and the film became a talking point. The film became this this trigger that helps people to remember what it was like during the Ebola and what they should do at this particular point in time. You understand me? So when we added the lockdown, people were not saying much. People were like agreed to the lockdown. But one important thing that's what I'm citing is the fact that with this government that we have now, many of their actions are taken from a pure political point of view. And so because of that, you find out that public participation when it comes to the outbreak, is absent. Participation of civil society, of religious bodies. Because one of the things that the past government was able to do in dealing with the Ebola was the fact that they were able to get local participation to talk, And so because of that, we had a real backlash. For example, churches and places of worship, churches and mosques were closed down even before we had the first corona case in Sierra Leone. And because of that, pastors were out shouting. It creates this noise of dissatisfaction against the government, and people were all shouting. Why? Because they had not learned the lessons that we saw during the Ebola that the film depicts in itself, which is allow local participation, allow people to talk about what they want to do, let them be part of the decision making, So we find out that the film has been very, very impactful from that particular standpoint in dealing with the outbreak, and also locally within Sierra Leone. I can also say that many people relate to the film. People can identify with this. I've met with several people that have spoken to me and said, oh, we watched that film. That thing changed my perspective. That film helps me to understand what it was like during the Ebola, even though they went through the Ebola themselves, but people lacked the information of what was actually going on in other communities and in the lives of people, in the lives of other people. Just yesterday, we spoke with the Minister of Basic and Senior School, Minister of Basic and Senior Schools, and he was suggesting that we continue screening the films in schools, and we think that that's a very good idea. So with the experience we had with survivors in our new projects, because we're working on a new project that looks at fishing, the impact of foreign fishing vessels within our waters. So with our experience, that is what we're now using to develop an impact strategy for Sierra Leone, a manual that we can use in Sierra Leone, I would think might work. You understand me? So we are looking at what were the problems, what were our shortcomings, because when you look at, in terms of funding, helping organizations like ours, like filmmaking organizations do their work, it's zero. There is no amount of funding that you can get from within Sierra Leone. So all of our funding, all of the aid has been coming from either organizations out of Sierra Leone or goodwill people, that are seeing our work and wants to help. You see, so that's exactly what has been happening to us. So because of that, we're looking at ways and means in which we could build this industry. As at now, it is only the people around the WION TV cycle that are still doing documentaries. WION TV is a collection of filmmakers. Now, like I said, WION TV in itself started by what I'll call an impact project, So Banker White, our co-partner, did Refugee All Stars. Refugee All Stars is a story about some Sierra Leonean refugees who are musicians who were in Guinea during the war, and now they use music to help themselves go through the hard times that they were going through. And so they came back to Sierra Leone and they met us. So that house started this collection called WION TV. And this collection has grown. It has grown to the point that we have lots and lots of filmmakers all over the country. And during the outbreak itself, these filmmakers are the ones who took upon themselves to shoot, you understand me, within the community. So we have something like between 14 to 17 filmmakers all over Sierra Leone, from Freetown to McKinney, to Kenema, filming for this particular film. Another important thing that's worth noting is the issue of collaboration.
Arthur, I'm going to have to pause you there for just a second. I received a prompt from the organizer that we've run over a bit and they have another event starting. They've given us a little bit of leeway, but I just wanted to use an opportunity to pose one question to the whole panel. But I think that issue that you were just about to go into, the issue of collaboration, is so important, because something that all of you have highlighted is listening to the community that the film is about, listening to the community that the impact campaign is designed to benefit, and collaborating with people. And that makes those decisions around top-down or bottom-up change more complicated, because you have more stakeholders, but it also makes it a lot more exciting. I also hear what you're saying, Arthur, about international funding, and I think that that's a problem that a lot of us face, is there just isn't local funding available for these kinds of campaigns. We're quite lucky in South Africa. The National Film and Video Foundation has said that we can apply to their distribution fund for impact campaigns, but if you use that funding for your impact campaign, you can't use it for festival and markets, etc. So it becomes an either-or choice. So let's round off with one question, and it might be that there's an element of collaboration that comes into this, but I'm really curious. Arthur has talked about this already in using the film during the COVID moment and extending the life of the film in a different context. But what pivots have you guys made during COVID? What are the challenges that you've faced? Has it been possible to do your impact campaigns during COVID working in Africa? Because we know that, we're seeing a lot of exciting stuff happening in Europe and America, where the pivot seemed to be quite quick, and people were very excited about going online, going digital, using social media, having virtual screenings and virtual discussions. But that's simply not possible with a lot of the audiences that we want to reach in Africa. So what are the models that you're developing? What are you guys doing?
Okay. Thank you, Leanne, for that question. I'll go first. I think for us, obviously, some challenges still stand. We still have the challenge of availability of network and also data to especially our rural communities. And so much as we would love to do like what we're doing with the communities, that's still a bit hard. So for us, for instance, we realize obviously people use WhatsApp a lot, and that's where you find them. And so it's been a question of, do we then make like an extended trailer, like a 10-minute cut of the film, and then continue, figure out how we can get it to the people where the people are. But then we were like, okay, hang on, our impact has got different level of activities. And so we decided, all right, so we are going to first of all continue with the actual activities happening on the ground, for example, the construction bit, because that one we can regulate and we can schedule with social distancing rules. And so we decided to carry on with that. And then for the youth, for instance, we know we can still at least reach them online. And so it's been a question of how do we get to the same goal, but using a different means? And how effective is this means going to be for us? So we've kind of divided. Some we're able to forge slowly right now, but some we've said, okay, let's hang on and see, because I don't know if it's the same in your countries where you've got schools almost being open, but they're not really being opened. And so we're like, let's kind of wait a bit and see if that's still going to happen, because, for example, the school screenings is very hard to find, something that takes in the place of that. So it's been a lot of that, kind of rolling with the punches and being agile to adapt fast as we can.
I think that adaptation piece is so important. And in the different presentations that you did, it came out that there were adaptations that were made because of challenges, but there were also adaptations that were made because of new opportunities that came up. And I think that's so important that, we shouldn't get stuck on the strategy that we write up when the film is still in production. We need to be flexible. We need to adjust to what's happening. Guys, it's 2 minutes to 1:30. I could listen to you for another 2 hours, but unfortunately there is another event, so we have to wrap up. But in closing, I just want to thank all three of you, Arthur, Wanja, Mickey, thank you so much for the time that you've given us and all of this knowledge that you've shared with us. I feel like this space is so important for creating new models for doing impact, not only in Africa, but around the world. And by capturing this information in this form, I feel so proud to be a part of that process and to share our models that we're developing in Africa with the rest of the world. So thank you so much. And guests, join us tomorrow. I know it's early, it's 8:30 Nigerian time, Western African time, but please do come. We have 2 incredible sessions lined up for you, and we'll hear of some impact campaigns from the rest of the world. And we'll also hear from funders and supporters of impact. So see you then.